Hello everyone, my name is Sylvain Meret from France, and I am very pleased to present this series of podcasts called Voices of Continuum. The series aims to provide recordings, interviews, and videos collecting years of knowledge and wisdom living in every teachers of the somatic practice called Continuum or Continuum Movement, which was developed by somatic visionary Emilie Conrad. Today, we have the pleasure to talk with Gael Rosewood, who was one of the first teachers of Continuum authorized by Emilie Conrad and Susan Harper.
So I'm going to start with the question you asked about when did I meet Emilie and Susan and kind of what those early days were like and how they affected me.
Yes, please.
Yes, so I met Emilie and Susan in San Francisco, California, and I'm pretty sure the year was 1978. Could have been 1977. And Emilie and Susan were coming to San Francisco once a month to teach. Susan was still very much apprenticing or assisting Emilie. And I have to say that from the beginning, the contrast between the two of them and the spaciousness or the support that was given for Emilie to be different and to communicate the way she did, while Emilie taught the way she did, was already a teaching in itself. It's been there. It was there at the beginning and probably in its most generous form there too. So that was a teaching in itself. The backdrop that I was in at the time when I discovered Continuum was that I had been in a spiritual school for 5 years. And it was a school that had many maps of consciousness and many meditations that we did. The meditations tended to be quite visual and very precise, with a lot of counting and repetitions, and often sitting still for long periods of time as we did these visual and counting, sounding exercises.
Did it root in some tradition?
And it was rooted in, not exactly, maybe Gurdjieffian would be the closest. This was a man who was saying that the techniques that took people towards enlightenment were scattered around in many traditions, and he was gathering them together and teaching us what worked. And so he was saying he was not a guru. I sort of prefer just to leave the name of the school out. I have opinions. I have my own experience with the school, and other people have many different experiences of it. And I mean, I'm glad I did it, but I was getting quite. I'm not very visual. I couldn't tell what was happening when I did these exercises. I couldn't feel precisely what had occurred, if anything. And the maps of consciousness had many labels and names about what level of consciousness you were in and what your ego was doing at the time, and all of this stuff that was scrambling me psychologically. So I was more and more tied in knots in a certain way. And there was a sort of cultish atmosphere around the school that I was chafing against. And some kind of, every organization has a shadow side. I was not happy with the shadow side of the organization. So I had been in that practice, and then I went to this workshop, and I took to it like a duck takes to water. It felt so pleasurable. It felt so natural to my kinesthetic learning style. And I just felt the huge potential to have something to do that made me feel physically better as well as mentally and emotionally better, and who cared about the maps of consciousness at that point. I was just like, oh, I feel so much better. I feel so much better. And I can do this. I know I can do this any old time. So my body was so happy, and I remember thinking very early on that there was so much pleasure from this way of working with undulation, which was the primary bread and butter of the work at that time. Mm-hmm. I thought this takes so much pressure off of the boyfriend-girlfriend dramas, which were going pretty strongly in my life at that time in my life. I was like, wow, this is a way to feel immediately touched mm-hmm. and relieved, and the possibility for eros to be a full body experience rather than one that only had its expression in sexuality felt like just a huge relief. Mm-hmm. And so anyway, that was an early perception of the potential of this work. Yeah. And I may loop back around towards it because it's gone through many changes over these, what is it, 40 coming on 50 years. Yeah. So, yeah. Fantastic. So, in the beginning, in her teachings, the concepts that first struck me about Continuum were the concept of bio-inclusivity, mm-hmm. and that sense of finding the intelligence of our animal body. Right. Mm-hmm. The concept that water as a system is crucial to life and is an intelligent system that is both living within us and is planetary. It was another enormous concept that continues to touch me over and over again. Yeah. And the sense that we can trust our body's innate wisdom and allow it to unfold and to give us the information that is relevant to us on any particular day. Those three concepts, I think, were what I couldn't have expressed to other people at the time, uh-huh. but they went in very deeply and touched me very deeply and kept leading me, mm-hmm. whether I had a good time or a bad time, workshop by workshop. Yeah. So, yeah. Other aspects of understanding the nature of Continuum and what potentials it had within it came a lot more slowly. Mm-hmm. And also, I think Emilie was being influenced by the people who were showing up and sharing in her workshops, and her concepts were being affected mm-hmm. and deepened and elucidated as she went along. So her teaching changed quite a bit. Uh-huh. I would say the first 10 years, it was a lot about the concepts I just talked about, mm-hmm. Bio-inclusivity and the intelligence of water in the body. And then other aspects started to be talked about and explored. And one of the strongest to come in was talking about sound. Mm-hmm. It's not that we weren't sounding before. Mm-hmm. It's how she started to talk about it, and also that she put a much more strong emphasis on it mm-hmm. about 10 years in. So I initially had a hard time with the emphasis on sounding. I loved the moving. Mm-hmm. And I couldn't feel that much happening initially through sound, and I would get frustrated. And I had a lot of blockage in my throat, in my ability to sound. Mm-hmm. So I was bumping into those restrictions a lot. So this was a hard passage for me to keep hanging in there. And secretly going back to wave motion when I was too frustrated to sound more. Mm-hmm. And it was a 5-year process, really, okay. To finally understand what she was talking about. Mm-hmm. So for me to express that to you now, what I would say is that we know the outside world through the sensibilities of our skin.
Mm-hmm.
More than skin, obviously vision and smell and all of that. But we are sort of trained in a way. Our expectation is that we will know the outside world as we come into contact with it through the nervous system that's in our skin. So we know glass from rock or from tree. We know fur, we know skin through touch.
Yeah.
We don't think of having a system that has that kind of sensitivity on the inside of our body.
Yeah.
So even though we do have sensations, for example, if we swallow, or burp or something like that, these are not considered to be of any value or interest to our consciousness. And in general, most people kind of think of the inside of their body as this sort of deaf, dumb, and blind cave.
Wow.
So the way that sound is taught and developed in Continuum starts to inform us, to teach us that we do have the potential for a lot of sensitivity in the inner realms of our body.
Right. Yeah.
And it's all due to the vibration, paying attention to the sensation of the vibration of sound.
Yeah. And that's quite a difference with like spiritual practice, like using mantras or using sound in a different way. I mean, I really like the way you connect it to the physiological aspect of making sound and the whole,
Yeah, exactly. So mantras are old as the hills. And very likely they came in with a similar intention. But in general, where I was exposed to mantras, and I was exposed to mantras in the other school, it had a lot to do with repetition. And we were maybe directed towards putting a sound in a chakra. So we were, sort of enlivening certain specific places. But what changed with the exploration of sound in Continuum was that we were, first of all, sort of switching the emphasis from the importance being to make the sound to the importance being to receive the sensation of the sound, the penetration of the sound as it touched us. And there's several things that I think are very important and sort of evolutionary about where this can take you as a practice. One of the things was that we could have agency within that practice to discover placing the sounds in any place in the body where we felt interested to try it out, into a hip joint or into a knee. And what this does as we develop the sensibility to be able to feel the vibration of the sound is it starts to point out to us as we're in an internal inquiry where we have feeling on the inside that comes to us fairly naturally and where we don't.
Yeah.
And this changes the game to individually be able to discover where you have feeling and where you don't. And when you can notice where you don't, and this is what Emilie would talk about as this is where the tissues are denser.
Yeah.
But another way to think about this is where you have chronic holding patterns that keep the tissue dense and protected. And so this starts to give you the information of where your body has suffered injury, whether psychological, or physical, where the shock and trauma lies in your body.
Right.
So this has come along a lot as the theory and the practice of trauma resolution has also come along.
Yeah, yeah.
So back in the early days of Continuum, that map was not available to us, and now it's been the last 20, 30 years that this has become an extremely important step for us to understand that everybody has layers or shards or places in their body that are numb due to shock and trauma.
Right. Yeah.
But the discovery of where those places are is the beginning of the healing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So what developed through this practice of sound and paying attention to the sensations of the sounds is we started to be able to work with ourselves to first discover where we weren't feeling, and then very gently, through going back and forth between the places where we do feel and the places where we don't, and the pleasurable practices that come in through the movement, we started to be able to very gently and lovingly unwind the numb and dumb places out of our system.
Yeah.
Yeah, so this is profound. It's profound because we have the ability to do this for ourselves, and we have the ability to do it it just very naturally happens in the increments that the body chooses. So the chances that you're going to re-traumatize yourself, reenact a trauma are very slim.
Yeah.
And tend to only happen in the more dramatic situations when you tend to be in a group container that then gives you the extra support.
Right.
So that's one thing that I think is at this time quite unique about the way that Continuum approaches sound.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So, wrapping back to the beginning about spiritual meditations, both spiritual meditations in general and physical exercise in general are still taught very much in the same way.
Mm-hmm.
And what this is that a teacher or a guide tells you what to do and how to do it. Mm-hmm. And then you follow those instructions and you repeat them many times. And it's not to say that there isn't any learning in that, or there isn't any profound openings and transmissions that happen through those techniques. But I just I don't know. I want to make the point because the personal day by day stepping into the unknown, that is part of a continuum dive, is it's definitely not for everybody, but it takes you into a potential that I want to start to elucidate.
Yeah.
So, because this is not PT. It's not Pilates, it's not yoga, it's not Feldenkrais, it's not Rolfing movement.
Yeah.
There is something that we are doing that holds the inquiry open and very personal in the subjective realm, where we are saying that our subjective informing has a wisdom in it and a knowledge in it, and that we can know what we know in this realm profoundly if we trust it.
Yeah. Sometimes
the other thing about it is that, go ahead.
No, I was just sometimes I'm thinking of something in a cultural world or something we could understand how we do this practice, and I'm thinking of the shamanic practice of dreaming, like in a way
because, when you said like not everybody, it may be not for everybody at this time, this practice. I was, in a way, I'm thinking like we are not used so much to keep alive our dreaming, and when we do this dreaming with the body and with our sensations, as an equivalent in a way to. Anyway, it was just a reflection, like when you were talking, that came to my mind.
Exactly. So I want to speak about this, and so I'm sort of moving to the philosophy of continuum. I'm a philosopher's daughter, and I can't help it. I have to go to these big pictures of where we are in the evolution of mankind and what is continuum as a philosophy.
Yeah, please.
Yes. All right. So I want to speak of the philosophy of continuum as I understand it, and as I heard it from Emilie. Mm-hmm. I'll say it a little differently. Emilie always, and did this much more in the beginning of continuum, mm-hmm. She was pointing backwards in time, mm-hmm. to our ancestors pre-Age of Reason. Mm-hmm. So pre-Aristotle, pre-Plato. Mm-hmm. And she was talking to the Gnostic traditions that were in the Greek culture before the Age of Reason, Asclepian temples, and how consciousness was revered by the Gnostics. Mm-hmm. And this tradition is still what we are hearkening back, what we're trying to pick up the thread of our ancestors from way, way back. Mm-hmm. This was really what Mystery School was about, was to take the symbology that was left by these ancestors and by all indigenous people, and to feel back into how consciousness was held and received pre-Age of Reason. Mm. So Age of Reason brought forward Scientism, mm-hmm. the empirical and objective study of the laws of nature that govern physical matter. Mm-hmm. And, I'm not wanting to tramp on science here. Mm-hmm. Science is fascinating and is discovering things all the time. Mm-hmm. And yet it is held within its own laws of how you do science, which is to have objective, repeatable data to prove what is so.
Right.
So our subjective dream world, for example, our subjective states don't fit into this model.
Right.
And our consciousness in our culture has been to trust what science can prove, and therefore to diminish the subjective realities as they're just subjective. They're just your own thing.
Right.
Are they valuable? Do they have power beyond your individual moment? Mm-hmm. And so the crux of the matter has been called the mind-body split. Mm-hmm. But I would say that that's not accurate. Mm-hmm. And I'm saying that because of my continuum experience. Mm-hmm. So the mind-body split is saying that the body is governed by the laws of nature, and that's that. Mm-hmm. But what I have discovered through continuum explorations is that there is consciousness in the body that you can develop that becomes, it's subjective, but it becomes a deep stream of informing that comes forward on different channels. Mm-hmm. From dreaming to visioning to metaphors to psychological work, mm-hmm. to new understandings to transformations within your personality.
Yeah.
So what I'm saying here is that it isn't a mind-body split. Mm-hmm. It's a brain consciousness split.
Right.
and that the consciousness is in the body. And that we therefore have the ability to consciously work with our own evolution.
Yeah, beautiful.
I feel very certain about it. So the body is both subject to the laws of nature and via abilities that take time to evolve. I mean, this is a patient process. Yeah. But the potential in it is to release the soul from the domain of matter. And to finish this, if you go back to how the Gnostics were approaching consciousness, they were honoring those subjective realms. The oracles of those times were considered intermediaries, emissaries between the divine world and the human world. And so their processes, which were definitely not objective or repeatable, were considered very important to holding the universe together, and holding it together by virtue of being in service to the divine. Yeah. So their attitude towards, at that time, the gods were very real for them. And so the human was there to serve the gods, and to do it through vehicles like we are doing it now. So right now, in modern days, it's more prevalent that you pray to God to give you what you need.
Right.
You know, we pray to the gods to take care of us. It wasn't thought that our consciousness was needed to find the divine world and to engage with it in order for the divine to come towards us.
Right.
So this is what I think we're doing. This is what Mystery School is about.
Yeah.
Okay, I've spoken. There we are.
Beautiful, Gael. It's really very inspiring. I love what you're saying, and it brings such such a strong statement and precise statement about the work and what it encompasses. So it's fantastic. Thank you so much. I think so. Probably for this interview, we'll stop it here. But I would love to continue the conversation and